Welcome to Impact Makers, the Crypto Sapiens podcast where we spotlight the remarkable individuals shaping the crypto landscape and leaving a lasting impact on the world. Join us for captivating stories of breakthroughs, triumphs, and invaluable lessons learned as we explore the dynamic world of the public greats working hard to build a brighter future for us all. I'm your host, John Ruth, the founder of Spark Ecosystems, building impact evaluation and certification tools, including Daracy and Hyperminter. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Magenta Ceiba. Magenta is a lifelong musician who plays classical piano. She was a classical music director and experimental music DJ at KZSU Stanford Radio. Magenta's impact extends to academia, where she lectured at Harvard and Yale about decentralized organizations and regional food system resilience. During her early years as the program coordinator at Radical Women in San Francisco, she was dedicated to elevating the voices of queer women of color through non-hierarchical organizing. Magenta also designed and curated Art as Propaganda, a program blending art skills and activism. All of this led to her work, movement building, educating, and inspiring communities. A visionary, in 2011, Magenta co-founded the Bloom Network, a revolutionary platform that's all about forging powerful connections between individuals and organizations dedicated to making a positive impact on our planet and society. Bloom bridges IRL communities globally with innovative blockchain technology and governance structures, making it easier than ever for folks to discover and engage in local initiatives and collaborative projects. At the core of Bloom's innovation lies a dynamic relational framework that defies the constraints of single-issue or one-size-fits-all solutions. With her deep-rooted commitment to community organizing and healing, Magenta continues to inspire change and growth, both locally and globally, and I'm so excited to speak with her today. Welcome to the show, Magenta.
Thanks so much, John. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for the sweet intro.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here with you. Like to start with the folks on the show, just talking about your origin story into crypto, and I guess really because Bloom kind of spans, I think, before, it was an idea long before kind of crypto, and crypto has become a great tool for it, but kind of your origin into Bloom, but then also into Web3 and crypto.
I think I found Bloom because the political organizing I was doing before, I found that folks were missing the healing tools to deal with the intergenerational trauma in order to communicate and organize effectively and achieve their political goals. And so I was like, okay, who has the healing tools? And I found my way to plant medicines, essentially. The first event I went to, Bloom used to be called Evolver back in the day. So I went to an Evolver Spore event. We now switched from the mushroom metaphors to the flower metaphors, but the mushroom stuff is still there. And then that's how I met what is now Bloom Network, like local organizers all around the world who are bringing together, ecology and healing and transformative justice and economy. They're kind of like connecting the dots between all these different social issues. And it had arisen out of Occupy and Arab Spring, and seeing, the kind of large scale societal infrastructure breakdown that was going to continue happening. And so we wanted to organize together in person and skill each other up. And it was kind of like a prepper thing in a sense, but from we're coming to it from experiences of working with plant medicines or meditation or other kinds of like transcendental breakthroughs, even just like witnessing the political climate at the time. Mm-hmm. And we were all having like these visions of, society could be different. And we were talking about them online. And so, I just, ran into this network through an event I think it was on psychedelics in general in San Francisco. And then pretty quickly after I got involved, kind of realized that the organization itself under Evolver was like a complete mess, like complete disaster. And so I was kind of like, all right. And the organizers were burning out because that's like really common for grassroots organizers. There's not an easy way to finance it, which is why eventually like crypto came into play. And it's like such a good fit because it is also decentralized and collaborative. It's really common for grassroots organizers to burn out. There's not an easy way to finance that kind of labor, especially because it tends to be like collaborative, decentralized, etc. And so I just, kind of got this message from the plants, both ayahuasca and mushrooms to just drop everything and get this community a sustainable financial model. I had no idea I was going to end up having to invent things to get there. I lived on gift economy for like 7 years before I went stable housing. It was just like the impact these communities were having was just so profound in terms of setting up entire like 10,000 person local food systems, completely transforming their local social entrepreneurship scene, indigenous solidarity, like people making just incredibly profound relationships with one another and forming businesses left and right. It was kind of like this organic incubation that would tend to happen through having consistent events, and like people from different movements show up, start to cross pollinate. And it was just like so clear. It was like the most powerful thing I could do with my skills and experience was to like focus and get these guys a business model. So yeah, kind of mushrooms made me do it / like weird business development project is how I got roped into it.
I love that. And maybe we can stop there, but then, I mean, see how it evolves, because it really sounds like you stumbled into this decentralized network of communities that was all really, for various reasons, from the political climate to just where we as humans are at in sort of our evolution and trying to find ways to survive, is where I see it. I assume you do as well, that you've got this decentralized network of communities that we're all looking for ways to do that, to begin to reconnect to each other and the planet and their communities. And, yeah, so I think that's just such a beautiful place to start with the work that you do, because now you are beginning to integrate all of these decentralized digital tools, and finding ways. But I love that this really starts in the IRL community space, and it sounds like you really set yourself up and would love to maybe even touch on the living in sort of the give economy. I've heard that used, but I've not really talked to too many people that like lived it deeply. And it sounded like for a while you did, which probably helped you to really integrate in with these communities and learn from them that much more, because you really were both relying on them, but also learning from them and giving, like, because it is reciprocal, like the giving, like people are giving to you, but you're giving back as well, in those types of relationships. Maybe, I don't know if there's a question in there somewhere, but where does that take us, I guess, from there?
Maybe just the gift economy thing. That was always a big part of Evolver Network. I think Charles Eisenstein got his start like touring through Evolver back in the day. Again, because of the Occupy origins, it was always something we were talking about. We would have events on gift economy, of different types. People were experimenting with like time banks, community currencies. Baltimore made the B note. That was one of the expressions of their local Evolver chapter back then. At the time when I became aware of Bitcoin, I just didn't have, it was back in 2011, but I had just started living on gift economy. So I had no surplus capital to like participate in it, unfortunately. But a lot of us did know about it back then. It's just, we had already made the decision to put as much of our energy into the community building work, and that there was no money there yet. It's still, it's just starting to be there, but we can talk about that stuff later. But yeah, I just had enough friends that understood what I was doing enough that they're like, come be bunk buddies with our 4-year-old for as long as you need to. When we're gone, like take care of her once in a while, water our garden when we're gone, just simple stuff like that. And yeah, it was a really good way to deepen relationships with people. And it was an interesting experience to just completely trust. Like, one of the things I found that prevents people from working on impact or like making decisions that would be healthier for their communities and healthier for themselves is just this fear of our making money being tied to our survival. And so it's really hard to make that leap. And so the medicine experiences were just like telling me to walk straight into that fear and just go straight into it. And so I just, at times I would run out of money for food. But then I would like read at the local co-op that there's a farm you can go to and help them harvest produce, and you'll get produce in return. And they gave me like this. So I borrowed a car and went out there, had a wonderful time, learned about dyeing fabric with mushrooms, learned how to harvest some kinds of crops I'd never interacted with before, had a wonderful day. And they gave me this giant box of produce that fed me for like 3 weeks. So the hardest thing was like accessing healthcare, because I was in a rural place. I heard a number of people like the hardest things are just some of the basics when you're living on gift economy like that. Like it's hard to not have a sustainable source of at least minimal income for either transportation when you need it, or healthcare, or if there's some kind of like education that you want to be doing that you really need a little bit of money to pay for it. So that's some of the challenging things. But yeah, the relationship building that comes with any kind of, community relationality based, exchange of wellness with each other is really profound.
Yeah. I did a lot of hitchhiking, which I sort of likened to that in terms of at least transportation. And then I did a little bit of when the couchsurfing.com was kind of first coming out. I did a little couch surfing here and there. So, little bits of that relying on, I think especially when I was doing a lot of hitchhiking, relying on the kindness of strangers in so many ways, because I was just sort of living on the road. And so it was just like somebody take me, but they're like, oh, well, you can come to the house and take a shower. You all right? You want a meal while we're traveling? And the kindness of humans as we start to see how interconnected we are. I think we're losing some of that with the digital world, but I think that there's still so much of that alive and real. And so at that point, that's still the Evolver network, but then there is a point where Evolver then evolves into Bloom Network. Where does that then transition happen? Like in that 5 to 6 year period of you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we should have split right in 2012 when the company ran out of money. We just really liked the name, and we wanted to keep the name, and we wanted to see if we could work stuff out with the company. The company had a very public Me Too problem before Me Too.
Got it.
And it also had some really, they hired a CEO that basically pivoted the company to selling new age, Schlotsky kind of products that had nothing to do with what we had collected everyone email addresses for. The community got really mad, etc. So yeah, we were trying to work it out with them so that we could keep the online social network and the name and the connectivity, which, is an 80,000 person email list, and millions of people had interacted with this thing and written content on it and everything. And suddenly the CEO just pulled the plug one day on the social network, didn't even talk to the local organizers. And those things, just made it really difficult to raise capital, because anytime we would say Evolver, in the Bay Area anyway, anyone who knew about that company would just give us side eye, and that'd be the end of the conversation.
Got it.
Unfortunately. Yeah. So yeah, it took us a few years to find the right name after trying to work it out with them. So in 2016, we finally decided on Bloom and then set up the entity. But it was really like an ongoing process of the community together deciding to secede from this company that had these typical corporate abuse dynamics, right? But the good part of that is that whole time we were talking about, okay, what do we really need from our social network that we're not getting from the mainstream networks, that we're not able to work out with this corporate hierarchy way? The thing really needed a DAO structure, but it was before DAOs, right?
Right.
It needed decentralized peer-to-peer leadership. And the only way we could get that was to separate. And we did this really deep governance design process looking at, okay, these power dynamics are normal in corporations. They're normal in our city governments. They're normal at nation state level, in our families. So how do we make a governance system that can be resilient to power abuse at the local and at a federated international level? So that was something really good that came out of the transition of deciding to secede from the corporate hierarchy structure, basically.
Got it. And I imagine in some ways that represented sort of the old ways in the colonialism of the world, and sort of that top down infrastructure. So I imagine the exercise of breaking free from that also gave so much to the community in terms of taking back that decentralization and taking back that ownership of their community, that it was really just a tool that you all were using to connect. I mean, it really was just a social media network, which is, but it didn't, I guess it failed. And so you also learned a lot from that, it sounds like, in terms of setting up the infrastructure for what became 2.0 and became ultimately Bloom.
Yep.
And so throughout all of this, I mean, it really sounds like, so 2016 Bloom is formed. At that point, is it relaunched as another social media network, or is it more grassroots than that? Like where does it sort of then reemerge, I guess? Because at that point you don't have all the, I mean, we can get to talking about the technology and the things where you're at now, and I definitely want to dig into that, but I assume at that point it really was the very basic infrastructure, more on the governance side of what this thing was going to be, more than having the actual network and any tech at that point.
Yeah, the network at that point was like relationships purely. And a lot of it was me just kind of holding the thing together with and a lot of us would have Skype calls one-on-one with each other. And it was just entirely relationship based at that point, because it still took us until 2021, end of 2021, thanks to Gitcoin, is the first time we were able to gather enough capital to hire an engineer to build the core of the social network. So we're just kind of treading water until then, working out the branding, making sure that, whereas the New York City company had kind of all these problematic aspects to our branding. How do we make branding that really hits it's like high tech and really fresh, like not like 90s WordPress environmental website, and like speaks to the diversity of our communities. So we're connecting Indigenous communities with climate activism communities, with transformative justice, with food system communities. Like each of these movements have their own aesthetics and norms of communicating. And we really wanted to make sure that we're being accessible and legible across them, but also like publicly accessible enough that we could help more of the general public find these subculture movements and participate in them. So it's kind of like slow moving that whole time, but just because there was no money and we're all doing this in between having jobs and kids and everything, right?
Right. And how big is the network at this point? Or at that point, I should say?
It's hard to say, because like I said, we had like an 80,000 person email list back in 2012 that then the CEO locked us out of. And so we were left with any local Blooms who had happened to keep their own list, our relational connectivity with each other. So this whole time we've been kind of estimating, just because of the conversations we have with each other and the metrics that we have from our different events and stuff, that there's about 30,000 people that have been this whole time, still working on the ground, even though I think there were far more than that they formed a community and really amazing permanent change happened in their communities. Initiatives happened, babies happened, like really amazing projects happened. That they just kind of lost touch with the network after that initial momentum. So that, I think that is kind of a consistent amount of things. And now just with the website, we're able to visualize, so people it's illustrated, right? You can see pictures of what's happening in the local communities and stuff. So we're right now at the stage of onboarding our community to the platform for the first time. It's, it's stable enough. It's a full featured social network at this point. So that we can start to reform that sense of community ownership and connectivity with each other. And then help more of our communities on the ground come into that as well. Whereas during that interim, it's been kind of relationships between the lead organizers with each other. And we're just kind of listening to our communities, what they need from social networks, and building what we can as we can. But now we're, helping build that sense of community identity again, which I'm really excited to see happen, because the magic of this holistic way of working and knowing that we're connecting deeply with place, but there's a global community of solidarity that's very profound and mutually supportive of each other as we do that. These sorts of movements are happening across the entire planet at, I think, quite large scale. It's just they're invisible in mainstream media, because the way that they work doesn't make other people money. It doesn't make advertisers money. And unless you happen to know someone in a community that holds your hand and you run into it, or you just somehow stumble across it, you're never going to find these underground networks of, it's really an alternate economy and alternate way of living that I think is the future. It's kind of this from my perspective, an anarchist like mutual consentful way of operating, where we're forming local cooperatives, we're forming community owned solar, we're planting our own food and like learning ways to prevent flooding and revert the climate change patterns on like really big scales. And we have all this knowledge and capacity, and it's highly scalable and it's extraordinarily cost effective. And now with the Web3 tools bridging, we can start to make it like legible to attract the financial resources. And with the social network that we've built, like we're just really excited to be finally at this point where we can help more of those people and those movements find each other and cross-pollinate, share knowledge, share resources, and become more visible to the general public that's like desperate to find this stuff. It's just, you can't find it on the mainstream networks.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're like, I guess that's what's amazing is you've been tapped into this community that has continued to evolve and grow. And now you are reconnecting it back to all this new tech at the same time. And so, yeah, what an exciting time for Bloom Network in the sense that you've got this whole community that's been a part of all of this for so long and has all this deep rooted history. And at the same time, there's going to be all these new organizations that are going to come into this. And I've heard you talk a lot about, the way that education is happening. And I imagine that that's one of the exciting things is just how much education can happen between all these different organizations because they each hold this knowledge. I talked to you, I listened to a few different talks that you've done, before the interview here. And, the way that you talked about Bloom being sort of like this mycelial network, but that it feeds like that it connects everybody. And then the Bloom is that when it's like feeding each other, and it's almost like all these different networks are coming together, and now they're going to be able to feed each other and feed off of each other in this like very, very symbiotic way. And yeah, I do feel like it is like just ripe for people to begin to connect. Like that's the missing piece is that the movements that are around and are working are off the grid to an extent in various ways, like off the mainstream media, but also like, yeah, just like literally they're just doing the thing, many of them. And so then to be able to connect them with this larger network where they can keep doing the thing, but they can, share that knowledge and learn from others. I think it's just, a super powerful network that you've been building.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your work with Gitcoin as well, because we're only at the point where we are now because of the support that we've received from Gitcoin. So
yeah,
just like profound eternal appreciation to you from like all our community. Well,
yeah, I mean, it's Gitcoin, but it's also, I think the whole sort of refi and climate movement. I think it's just, you've been somebody that for the last couple of years in this more crypto space has had a very clear vision and just been continuing to build the tools and iterate on. Like it has felt like you are somebody that came to this with a true problem that said like, look, I have this network of like 30,000 people and we need to connect them all and then give them economic incentives if we can, and give them DAO governance structures and give them like, here's like all these real world people, they need this. Versus there's a lot of builders and founders that are coming to this with like, oh, I'm just looking for a problem. I got to find me a problem so I can build something. And so it's a very different perspective to speak to a founder that is like coming at this from the other direction. So.
Yeah, I so often wish people would come help us instead of like building another thing. I'm like, yeah, you could just take what we just told you we figured out over like 15 years and do your own thing, or you could give us a little bit of your engineer time. Yeah. Because you also picked up and you also have started coding. I mean, I see you have other development support, but it's just me. I'm the sole coder on Bloom right now. Yeah.
You're doing everything. Okay.
Inverter Network they're coming out with their smart contracts. They're going live on Optimism mainnet, I think end of July-ish. Okay. So they built the Bounties app. We can talk about that in a minute, but they built the first Web3 tool that we'll use. They actually made a user-friendly app for us to make it easier on me integrating it into Bloom for now.
Okay.
So we have had developer support on that front as well. Yeah.
Okay.
But there's so much stuff that is kind of like over my head. Like we need to set up an image delivery network. So the site is like faster because it's really image heavy. It's like a whole social network, right? And there's some like
Right.
scaling and like lighthouse issues that is just, I'm not deep enough into development yet to be able to easily solve those. So there's like pretty like tangible, like kind of, for an experienced developer, somewhat normal tasks that like we could sure use a lot of help with. But sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I think that's a call to action to all the devs out there. If you hear this this talk and you're looking for a little side project or something more, like yeah. Yeah, it sounds like you need support. It sounds like that's one of the ways to help you grow, but you've been sort of taking it on yourself and doing it. You've been making it happen.
Yeah, it's been actually really interesting to do it that way because one, like, it's nice to have it in-house in the sense that it's all community organizers who are on the team right now. And so people can tell us we need this feature and we deeply understand it because we've been there on the ground as well and understand why, right? And like, I've learned to develop out of this on the ground use case rather than going to school or in a corporate like context. So the growth of the development fully from the grassroots, like bottom up place and then scaling each other up, which we're continuing to do. Actually, there's some PhDs who are helping on the grant writing front right now and helping local Blooms grant write. And also they're helping them capacity build in the sense of learning to document their impact more professionally. Because that's part of the gap in resourcing these grassroots movements is folks don't tend to not have higher layers of education. They don't know anyone that because of the stratification of like socioeconomic statuses, they tend to not know anyone who like has a bunch of money or has higher education degrees. And so the gap to being able to access grants or understand how to do specific kinds of impact measurements that speak to like higher socioeconomic brackets and or people who need like higher academic sort of like verification of stuff. It's just there's such a big gap there. And so we're really trying to skill our people up directly to be able to do that rather than, have them outsource a rather expensive person or help them, collaborate with a local university to do that kind of documentation or something as well. So yeah, continuing to like skill our existing community up and maintain that grassroots peer-to-peer like ethos of who has leadership power and like wisdom and knowledge really that's guiding the development of the network.
So it sounds like building as much of the knowledge into the network that you can instead of hiring out third parties to the extent you can avoid it. And then maybe we should take this out to like the vision of the future a little bit here, because that might help folks understand exactly like both what you're building, but how you envision like all these things working together long term. So if we go out 5 years, 10 years down the line, you've got a lot of development help, you've gotten all the money you need. Now, like how does the network operate? Like and I think what I'm interested in, maybe the listeners are interested in, is like, how do the incentive mechanisms work? Like like as you begin to integrate all these crypto tools, so now there's going to be, I assume there's tokens, there's incentive structures, there's, for all these communities. And I've heard you talk a little bit about there both being sort of potentially localized currencies and then more regional currency, like different things. But would love to talk about like what is your vision for where this is going and what, you've been dedicating 15 years of your life to this. Like where do you see this going?
Yeah. Well, I think in 5 to 10 years that, well, there will be more local Bloom hubs. So more, groups that are forming coalitions of these local grassroots networks to help them share resources. Well, I think the business development of this ecosystem, the Bloom ecosystem, the grassroots network way of building wealth together will be a little bit more developed. We'll start to be having more finances flow in. So where we figured out, for example, in Uganda, where they've figured out large scale commercial permaculture agroforestry, where they're, instead of making parks, they're making like living food forests for community to provide for each other and be well together and stabilize their local microclimates. They're already teaching like 70,000 kids, or have already taught 70,000 kids how to do permaculture throughout the Ugandan school system. They're about to teach 100,000 more. That's just one bloom like now. And so as we scale and start to make their methods and the methods in use in many other local blooms, from bioremediation for how to use different species of sunflowers to draw lead from soil. Bioremediation is one area we have a lot of knowledge in our network around, from recovering from mining or fires and this kind of thing. We just have a lot of like really advanced scientists in that area for some reason. So I could easily see us forming like these spin out franchises as well. So like a bioremediation collective that, helps piggyback on our social network has kind of like it's sort of like LinkedIn mixed with Meetup, mixed with Facebook a little bit. So you can find skills that you need that you may not have in your community. You can search, find someone who has that skill set, bring them in. There's a free there. You can distinguish between like if this is a free exchange or an economic one in the platform. But once I'm going to deploy our token about a week from now. And we're going to add community currency properties to it. So people could then trade the reputation token they have essentially from the network as well. But anyway, you can like match skills and talent, whether you need to do that for free because of the stage you're at, or the more and more we build financial capacity over 5, 10, 20 years together at the local, at the bioregional, and at the international network scale, the more people will be able to start to unplug from their extractive industry jobs and plug into these projects. So someone who would be working inside a data analytics company, pulling their hair out because they're fucking miserable working for these there's so many like types of industry jobs that people tend to reliably be very unhappy at because they know they're not doing something good for the world. It's not meaningful to them and it's their whole day, right? But they can't find work doing other things. So I think as these systems come online, as Bloom Network comes online, and we start to build ways of covering our housing costs, our food costs, our energy costs collectively as community, people will rely less on those high salary extractive jobs and can start to apply their skill sets and be paid to work on these, say, for example, a social network like Bloom, where instead of the analytics engineered to glue you to your screen, it's engineered to help introduce you to projects that you're interested in, where you live, and then go take action in your community in real life. And so I think the business development capacity of Bloom Network in 5 to 10 years, because we've done so much of the legwork and the R&D on what works to have this combination of like mutual aid kind of activities with solid revenue generating income streams. And the more we do that, the more we're going to be able to leverage things like the community farmland trusts that we have templated. So instead of dropping, $70,000 to get your legal thing set up for it, you have these templates and it now only costs $10,000. And then you have your community farmland trust, 10 farmers in your community who've been trying to find land, they couldn't find it affordably, are now able to farm. You form a cooperative housing trust, and then you have long-term sustainable rent and collective ownership that's not being like put into the speculative market. You have more and more of these like self-resilient, regenerating systems on the food level, on the energy level, on the economic level start to form, and you can start to break up the reliance on those extractive industry jobs and goods production in order to like be well together. We can, it'll be easier to work in a local cooperative, getting your needs met and being like truly happy, while you're addressing like climate restabilization. And yeah, so I really think, it's going to be, in the early stages of that 5 to 10 years from now, but certainly 20 years and beyond. My hope is that it's all designed to scale up incredibly quickly as well. So that's one of the things, when Evolver launched, within the first week, 200 cities signed up and said, hey, we'll do this. And it kind of broke because it didn't have the robust governance structure there. And so we really took our time with Bloom to make sure we can handle the scale. We've worked out the social governance kind of personal vetting dynamics of leadership at every scale of the organization, from locally to who has roles at the international level, so that we can handle rapid scaling without disruption to communities' well-being.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Taking it because you did mention your launch. So where are you at in that evolution of building? Because I see how all these communities start to just come together. And so now they're all, how it all stacks on top of each other. And because it is both like regional but also very localized, like how all these different smaller organizations all come together to form this larger organization. And so now you've built the rails, I guess the sort of Web3, both like DAO, but also token rails to then onboard all these communities into this new network, that in terms of the actual like tech network, that obviously the network of people has existed. But talk us through what is launching soon and what you'd like to tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. So in some senses, we're launching the social network for the first time, in that we are financially incentivizing our community to join it, like paying for their time to start posting on the platform, essentially, and invite their community members too. The way we're doing that is, to start, we have, I think, a $12,700 grant pool. We're trying to find matching grants for it. But I just sent the email to all the local organizers today. It starts today, our first round of this, and it'll go through the end of September. And we'll try to get into a quarterly cycle, similar to how some of the other retroactive public goods funding like methods are doing. And what we do is we have, at the start, we'll probably evolve this as we go, but people write impact reports on Bloom to, show pictures of what they're doing locally, to the best of their ability, describe the impacts, both quantitative and qualitative, show pictures, just, so more people can see this world, kind of like I was talking about. So it becomes more visible. We aggregate the media. Bloom is a place you can go to, toggle your global local media feed and see what events and actions are happening near you, and like get inspired and go participate. So the way it works is that in our bounty system that's built by Inverter Network, and I'm going to get these integrated as soon as I can replace our Supabase login with the account abstraction Web3 login.
Are you
but
using
basically, Privy, there's two of them. We're using SvelteKit, so I think there's only two account abstraction tools that work with JavaScript, as far as I understand, which is Privy, and Web3 Auth is, I think, the other one I've been looking at. Yeah, because you guys were looking at using Privy as well.
We are looking at, we're working on it for a tool to do some onboarding for the ecological benefits framework, the EBF.
Oh, amazing!
So we're trying to build a. It sounds like probably in some ways, and I'd love to hear your take on this thought, but like sort of the Web 2 mullet. It's like I'm trying to build a tool that feels very Web 2 in the front end, Web 3 tools in the back end for data storage and for transparency and things. And I think we're finally getting to this point where, and there's certainly those users out there that maybe would push against that and say, no, you got to go all in decentralization. But to me, if we're really going to onboard the next, especially talking in the context of real IRL communities, they're going to come in with their email. And, eventually we can teach them how to have a wallet, but they're going to come in with their email, and we have to be able to take their email, give them an account, and be able to give them tokens. Like, that's just where we're at as far as I'm concerned. It sounds like you probably are. So that's why I asked about that, because we're, working a little bit with that. But I think it's something a lot of people are trying to solve for. Is like, how do you bring in normal everyday users, be able to give them tokens, then give them some access and ownership, and sort of progressively decentralize their stake in Web3. But,
yeah, exactly.
So you've got Inverter Network has built the smart contracts, and then you've built all of the like front end and the database that connects all of the organizations together and all of their. So maybe I can spit back to you how I think this like looks, because since we're not sharing screen or anything like that, but it's essentially each like region, and then you can find then a local organization there, and then you go to there, and then they each have like their own blog of here's what's happening. Maybe it's events, maybe it's articles about local things like that, but then you can zoom out to more a regional level and look at some of those and sort of connect in and out of granularity of the communities that are on the network, if you will. But maybe take it from there, I guess.
Yeah, and it's all on a feed. Like I so often, like I don't know why the mainstream platforms don't have global, local, taco. Like I want to filter all my content by local. Come on, or by any number of filters, right? Like, yeah, there's other filters that you can use. I'm a big fan of like autonomy in what your interface looks like. But yeah, so yeah, that's exactly it. You can, see these different layers of locality up to global. And then the way that works with the Inverter app is they enter the wallet address of each of their community members. And I have that very integrated with Bloom's site in terms of like the person who's putting the impact form in can go see the list of their local Bloom members' addresses and just like copy it in there. They put the number of hours that that person participated in the activity. So say they did a community food forest planting over a weekend. Then, people might have participated varying hours of that. And the app automatically calculates 30 times the hours is the amount of flow for FLO for flowers. That's our cooperative patronage token that they'll receive. Their local Bloom Hub is also going to get 1.2x the total amount of flow that the individuals in their community receive. The purpose of that is to incentivize them to learn how to manage a community treasury while also incentivizing as much as possible individual participation because they're getting individually rewarded. Then the grants pool is going to be distributed proportional to how much flow everyone earned in that period. Probably with some normalization in the case that two local Blooms have, like 80 people working full time and everyone else has a small amount, right? Like we want the grants distribution to be meaningful to people. We may evolve from the hourly approach to like more impact based or multipliers for certain kinds of activities. But at first, what we want to do is illustrate, like right now, this labor is invisible. It's being done completely for free. What would it look like if we were all getting paid, say, 30 USD an hour to do it? So there's a visualization, your flow distribution. This is what labor is happening across the whole freaking world. There's like so many people doing this. And then let's de-risk for funders who aren't able to vet grassroots networks because they're not as centralized and don't have the reporting capability, or they're too small of projects to be worth the funder's time, right? So let's aggregate that documentation. We're rewarding it after the fact. It's already done, documented. There's a verification in this loop. Like there's a role of a verifier who has to verify the bounty. Only once it's verified does the flow get issued. At first, we'll handle that with just our grants team, but then we'll probably localize that down to the level of like, these community members and that this is true and happened, or, who is this person that's spam? Or can you please put a little bit more info in your impact report so other people can learn from you and to support you in getting grants? So that's essentially like the unique retroactive public goods funding mechanism that we've put together that both incentivizes people to document their impact on a platform that's designed by them and for them, and then also rewards them for their participation, incentivizes more people to come out and participate, and then hopefully builds the grants pool for everyone as we make this layer of grassroots community organizing like more normalized, more accepted, more visible, more findable for more people and for more funders.
So it sounds like you're building both an incentivization structure for all these people that are doing all this great work in communities around the world, likely for free or to little or no pay, because they want to take care of their communities. You're adding a reputation system because now you've got long term, you're going to then have all these reputational connections between all of the different people in the network. And then on top of that, adding in, so you have kind of a flow of tokens that's coming through that. And then you'll have, sort of quarterly pools where there's a grants like that are distributed to everyone based on their impact over that quarter, if you will. And if I understood the multiplier, so if you and I are in a network in our little town of 2, you're going to get, say, 1 flow and I get 1 flow, and then the network would get 2.4 flow. So we would each get 1 individually, and then the network itself would get 2.4, 1.2 times what we both got together. Because and then we would communally govern that treasury.
Exactly. And ideally that governance happens reputation based. because it's a measure of your true investment and also experience and knowledge in all likelihood of your community, right? So, one thing at a time, we're going to teach our people how to use wallets. It takes us 40 minutes right now to go through that training, like teach them what is cryptocurrency and why use it. And here's how to set up a wallet.
Yeah.
But even though we're using account abstraction, like because we want to upskill our people to be able to access other Web3 tooling, it's a really common ask for people in our network. Please teach us about cryptocurrency. We trust you. There's a lot of noise. Help us not get hurt by like starting to engage in this. So yeah.
No, it's so important. I mean, even if you're going to abstract it away, there's a point when you have to educate people. The account abstraction only helps really in the very beginning. Like but very quickly you have to still educate the people, or they can still not have any control over their thing. They can still then be taken advantage of and still their security risk. It's just maybe a little less, so to speak.
All of the above. So once you have, here's $200 for you, you can use to pay rent. Like here's when you need to learn how to use it. Here's $200 that you'll need, or here's $10,000 for your community. Yeah, you need to figure out how to keep that safe. Like you need to really know what it means to self custody and have your own bank account in a bank that you own, so to speak. And so that becomes so important. But there's layers to that. So that's great that you're both working on the onboarding, but also getting people in as easily as possible at the same time. I think that's a great strategy in terms of that. And if I heard right from, I think some of the other talks you've given, you all are using the co-op structures out of Colorado. So you're similarly structured to like Spork DAO and some of these others that have come out of Colorado. And so that's the framework in which you're using. So it essentially is a co-op model then, where the flow token is a governance token within all of Bloom network, similar to say their work token or their Spork token, excuse me. Sort of. We're like still in the process of forming that co-op. I think we're just 10K shy of formalizing the membership contracts, like writing them out into legal code. But yeah, it will work like Spork DAO. Because the co-op requires one person, one vote, we have like two member classes, right? One is the local Bloom hubs have voting rights over certain things. And then individual members have a different set of like voting and proposal rights and stuff. But I'm pretty sure the way the co-op law works is that's like one person, one vote. I have to double check that with our lawyers, but at least the local Blooms, I'm hoping they can use the reputation weighted voting using Flow, because I think that's going to be a good marker of, like I said, the knowledge. But yeah, basically the Spork DAO, it's like a federated DAO. So each local Bloom, it's the only legal model we could find that allows us to truly collectively internationally own the infrastructure.
I imagine that's one of the bigger concerns, because you're such an international coalition. It's not US centric, even though you're using a US structure to pull it all together.
Yeah, exactly. Because like the big long-term plan, 100-year plan is we fucking take over the global governance system with a decentralized place-based like thing based on consent and these like more sophisticated decision-making tools that are enabled by today's technology, rather than running our global governance on 17th century technology in a system that incentivizes sociopathy. Like it's just, that's out of date.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes. No, that is the long vision. And I think that's where what you were alluding to before is I think we're moving to this time when we have to relocalize ourselves in a lot of ways. And that this network is just, it may be one of the leading ways in which we do that, but it is just one way in which we begin to relocalize and then take back ownership of our own, communities, because that's what we're going to need to do, likely long term. That's probably the bottom line if we're going to survive. That's you're right. Systems from hundreds of years ago don't really make sense today.
We're going to need to like figure out ways to allow migration through that as well, because there's, as far as I understand, there's going to be swaths of earth that you can't grow food in anymore. So, but if we have community autonomy over even just like having a local economic permission to absorb refugees, because you have the healing tools and the economic infrastructure to absorb that and integrate in a good way,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I think localization is actually a good bet on the refugee front as well, because I think it's by 2050. I keep forgetting, but the numbers of people who are going to migrate due to climate related causes and like the political fallout of that is at least like 2 billion by the end of the century. I forget. It's very large.
Whether it's political or whether it's actual climate collapse that's beginning to push people into new areas. Yeah. Yeah, it's really a lot to, a lot to think about. It's big, it sounds like, yeah, we have some big problems to face, and it sounds like you're tackling them with the most innovative solutions that you know how. And yeah, maybe on that note, given we're a few 10 minutes or so left in the interview, would love to bring in my my co-host Shmolak. Shmolak is a friend of the podcast, likes to stop in and hello Magenta.
Hi, Shmolak.
My name is Shmolak. I really love the work that you're doing at Bloom. We monsters don't have any networks like that, so maybe someday we can get some Bloom network for monsters. I'll start organizing the people, and you can onboard them later. Lots of my monsters friend need a lot of help. But you humans are really the ones that are in trouble. It seems like I can't help but get a little bit worried listening to you talk about all these old systems that are breaking down and all the work that needs to be done. But just wanted to ask some basic questions about a few things. So first and foremost, yes or no, pineapple on pizza?
Maybe sometimes.
Okay. I'm a situational pineapple kind of guy. I'm with you. I think you have to have something spicy like jalapenos if you're going to have pineapple, personally. And what about, do you have a favorite animal?
Oh, I love all the animals. That's so hard to choose. I really like nudibranchs.
What's it? Oh, I've heard of those, but I don't know what they are.
It's a sea slug.
Oh, yes. I think I've seen little pictures of them. Little slugs of the sea.
They're very colorful.
Love it. Do you have a favorite public good?
Food grown in community.
Ooh, food is a good public good. Indeed. So, with all this talk of, a little bit of doomerism in the world, there's a lot of work to be done. I know John here and I, we have rough days some days. It gets a little dark in here and just worrying about the world, but it sounds like you've, got some things to share. Wondering if you have any tips for staying optimistic in this crazy world.
Oh, yeah. The main one is whenever I, look through all the possible futures, including even if the future of complete apocalypse, my answer is always the best thing for me to do is to demonstrate the optimistic, utopic one with people around me. And I could put all my energy into all of the worrying that I want, but even if that's going to happen, it's still the best thing for me to do to express myself creatively and lovingly with the people around me. And that helps me not get scared about the possibilities, because I'm doing what I can do in this moment with people that I care about.
I don't think there's much better answer than that. Yeah, I think we just all have to be playful and enjoy the time we have, because you're right. We're only going to get so much time, whether it's all coming to an end or not. So, anyway, on that note, maybe I'll I'll hand it back to John. But pleasure seeing you. You keep up all the good work over at Bloom. Keep fighting my brother. My brother Moloch is terrible, and you're doing great work fighting against him. So that's That's Schmolach.
Yes, I love Schmolach.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. Appreciate you. This has been such a wonderful hour of chatting. Let's see, where do we go from there? That was a really great Schmolach interview. I guess what else do you want to leave us with? What haven't you told us about Bloom, about the world, about life, about music? We haven't even talked about music, but I was digging into. I do as much research as I can about the folks that I talk to, but I saw that you played classical piano, accompanist. That's a really hard word. I took it out of the intro because I was like, I can't say that word. For 12 years or something, and then a DJ at college and all sorts. I don't know. I feel like there's probably tons we could have talked about besides all this. But where would you like to leave folks with as we close out the show?
Well, Bloom has an open mic every month. If you look on Bloom Network in the footer, you can see when the community calls are.
Okay.
And you can download the Bloom calendar and you can see all our upcoming events. But one of them, it's called Night in the Bloom Room, and it's emceed by Microscopic Meg.
All right.
Because a lot of people in our network are creatives, like they're poets or artists or musicians, or even if there's a piece of philosophy you want to come read, whatever your expression is. So yeah, that's a fun way that we can connect online about the music things.
That sounds wonderful. And what a great way to bring the community together for just open mic, even, and I imagine especially curated but digitally, then to be able to bring your network together from all over the world. And I bet some magical moments happen in those calls for sure.
Yeah, it's strange running a social network that's like basically designed by poets. It's really, really something. There's some really good poets in Bloom.
Wow. That's actually something that struck me in learning more and more about Bloom, is just that it does seem like part of the original mission was to set free all these people that are poets, that are artists, that are musicians, and that they have all of that to give and more, and that how can a network be created where people can be incentivized to do good work in the world so that they can also do all the other good work in the world that they are like put on this planet to do, whether that's make music or paint pictures or, plant gardens or whatever else it might look like. Really redesigning the system so that we can actually participate in the things that we came here to this planet to do. And so I think that's the like big vision of Bloom and what you're creating that has me most excited. And so I love hearing about that. I'll definitely have to get that on my calendar and see if I can stop in, but definitely welcome all the listeners to connect with Bloom in that way. And I'm sure they can find you on all the socials.
People can join too. It's actually, we opened registration. There's a very short application, but if you go to bloomnetwork.earth, you can join as an individual, like a general member, or if you want to connect your project or local community to Bloom Network as a local Bloom hub. There are, for example, there's some Refi DAO chapters that are also local Bloom hubs.
Okay.
So then you'd be eligible for like the next cycle of the rewards as well. But the social network is open for people to begin using now as well. So just wanted to drop that.
That's amazing. I definitely will have to also think about like my work with the Solar Foundation and all the communities that we're working with. I would love to get them involved. And my brain's been spinning with all sorts of synergies as we've been talking here. It seems like there's just so much, so many possibilities with what you're doing. And also something you mentioned earlier, like for folks out there, like looking for something to build, don't just keep recreating the wheel that you and the entire Bloom Network have been doing some amazing work and a lot of learnings over the last, 15 years, give or take. And so I think also for those builders out there that before you go build something new, see who else is doing it and see if you can add to what they're doing, or at the very least, make sure you're really connecting with all the builders around you and seeing how what you're building can complement and how we work together. I guess that's really what I want to say, because I think that the real power in this movement is when we begin to lock all the Legos together and build these hyperstructures that really can change the world. So definitely to all the builders out there, look for ways to collaborate and work together, especially with folks like Magenta and Bloom. So, anything else? Any final words?
Just thank you so much, John. It's always a pleasure to get to talk with you. Thank you for understanding what Bloom is and for hosting me on the podcast. And I'm excited to stay connected and deepen our connection.
Yeah, same here. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to all the listeners. You can tune in again next time for another great Impact Makers episode, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.